Good afternoon and welcome to the dedication of the Charles Fairhurst Rotunda. My name is Joseph Labus, a faculty member in the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering. The department head, Paige Novak, is traveling, and I have the privilege of representing the department and presiding over the proceedings. Acknowledgements are the first order of business, and special thanks are extended to the department and to Itasca Consulting for co-sponsoring today's event. Thank you. The dedication will involve presentations delivered in this room by three distinguished guests, and the dedication and the unveiling ceremony will take place in the Rotunda. We're recording the event here in this room, but not in the Rotunda, so there will be an exchange of a microphone for the speakers. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to provide a very brief account of our building. In 1970, the University of Minnesota decided to merge its programs in civil engineering and mineral engineering to form a single administrative unit, the Department of Civil and Mineral Engineering. However, the faculty were housed in 5 different locations on campus. We didn't have a home. Several of the laboratories and classrooms were over 60 years old, and the national status of the department's graduate program was in decline. A new building was an essential step towards the development of a high-quality academic program. John F. Kennedy is credited with saying, "Things do not happen, things are made to happen." Several factors entered the picture for the new building, including the nearly perfect local geology and our first modern-era energy crisis. But make no mistake, Charles made things happen. And in 1983, the newly constructed Civil and Mineral Engineering building opened and received the Outstanding Achievement Award from the American Society of Civil Engineers for pioneering use of underground space. 95% of our building is underground. As all of you know, through the leadership of Charles, the University of Minnesota became one of the leading rock mechanics research centers in the world, and many of the developments have transformed the field. But one could argue that his greatest professional achievement is what is now called the Civil Engineering Building. Charles, on behalf of current and former faculty, staff, and students, thank you for making this building happen. And congratulations on the naming of the nicest space in the building, the Rotunda. Okay, it's my honor to introduce Mark Board, representing former students of Charles and providing a professional perspective. Mark received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees in geoengineering from the University of Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Mark.
I was just thinking, driving over here today, that it's been 50 years that I've known you, Charles, since I first showed up at the old building there and asked about possibly becoming a student there. I was a geology student, and they took me up to the office, introduced me to you, and you sent me to that man right back there, Steve Crouch. So in the same day, I've known both of you for 50 years now. So anyway, it's an honor for me to represent the former students and friends of Charles Fairhurst, who is Professor Emeritus and former department head of what is now called the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering. Charles, most of you know, is a native of England. He received his PhD in mining engineering from Sheffield University in 1955, and he moved to the United States in 1956 to take up a position as a research associate in the School of Mines at the University of Minnesota. Through a sequence of promotions, he became professor in 1965 and was appointed head of the School of Mineral and Metallurgical Engineering from 1968 to 1970. From 1972 to 1987, he was head of the Department of Civil and Mineral Engineering. Charles has received numerous awards and distinctions during his professional career, and I'll name only a few. I think we'd be here all afternoon if I was naming all of the awards he's gotten, but some of the more significant ones is that he's a Theodore Bennett Professor of Mining Engineering and Rock Mechanics from 1988 to 1997. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering from 1991. He's an officier of the National Order of the Legion of Honor from France in 2013. In the 1960s and 1970s, Charles was a driving force behind the establishment of rock mechanics as a recognized engineering discipline. I think a lot of people don't think of that. Before that time, it was sort of a boutique science, or engineering science that wasn't really established as a field of engineering. He was one of the founders of the International Society for Rock Mechanics, which is called the ISRM, which was established in 1962 and which now has a membership of about 8,000 individuals. He held various leadership positions in the field, most notably the presidency of ISRM from 1991 to 1995. Through the leadership of Charles, the University of Minnesota became one of the leading research centers in rock mechanics worldwide, and was the birthplace of several important innovations, which I think now most of us that are in this field working just take for granted and don't really realize where they were originated from. Some of these are things that you will recognize are everyday terminology. First is hydraulic fracturing as a technique for measuring stresses at great depth in the rock, and this was done with Charles' students back in the 1970s. It was quite a topic of research amongst graduate students here. Determining the post-peak failure response of rock with servo-controlled testing machines. Using computer methods to predict the stability of deep mines. And that was at the very sort of cutting edge of the use of computer technology for doing modeling work. And encouraging the development of the distinct element method to model the behavior of blocky rock masses. His work of over 50 years spans nearly all aspects of rock mechanics and rock engineering, and these include topics such as drilling, laboratory testing, mechanical excavation, comminution, stress measurement, stability of underground openings, design of tunnel supports, rock reinforcement, and underground storage. And so one of the things that I wanted to just emphasize is how I think the field of rock mechanics has changed, and that people have become very specialized in very specific little areas. And back in the day when Charles was actively working in this department, the breadth of work that they were doing was huge. And I just don't see that myself anymore in this field. It's people that are very specialized in certain areas. Because of that, he was able to then draw students from a large range of disciplines to work with him. He has written more than 150 publications. He consistently in these publications emphasized rigorous application of the principles of mechanics to rock engineering, which to me is the hallmark of the University of Minnesota, is the emphasis on mathematics and mechanics rather than simply empirical methods that you find in so many universities that are, many of which are, I think, highly regarded. And that's one of the reasons I think that it's a great thing to be from the University of Minnesota, is because you have a background in the basic mechanics and mathematics, which a lot of people don't have. From countless trips worldwide, he was invited to give lectures, sit on review panels, or consult, and from that he brought a continual supply of international students and scholars to Minnesota. He was an advisor and mentor to 23 PhD and over 30 master's students, and instilled in them all an appreciation for innovative research. These former graduate students, many of whom hold influential positions in the U.S. and abroad, are known collectively in the rock mechanics community as the Minnesota Mafia, with Charles as the godfather. And finally, I know that I speak for many of his former students in saying that we're extremely grateful to Charles. He has had a profound impact on our lives, and I think, looking at people in this room, that's certainly true. Through his own example, his mentoring and advice, his friendship, and especially the promotion of other people's careers, which has been amazing to all of us. And for that, I would like to thank you on behalf of everyone, Charles.
Representing the family of Charles and providing a personal perspective, it is my pleasure to introduce Anne Charlet, the oldest daughter of Charles.
As I said, I'm not telling Dad because then he'll write it. Hello, I'm Anne, Charles and Margaret's oldest child. And thank you, Joe, for asking you to say a few words about my dad on behalf of the family. I was reassured when you asked a daughter to speak, because I was sure you weren't naming a men's room after him. But no, it's the Rotunda, which is so lovely and a fitting place to be associated with Dad's name, because you just know that at some point almost anyone who comes into the building will pass through there. Many in a hurry to get somewhere else, many stepping carefully down the stairs as they discuss an idea with a colleague, and some who just might slow down and admire this organic shape. A circle, a cylinder, a womb, a center, and actually like a place from which a rock core sample has been carefully extracted. I will admit this is one of the more daunting tasks I've had, because daunting speaking requests I've ever had. Many of our family are here today, as are several good long-time friends. So there's several real-time fact checkers here, should you need them. And we thank you all for being here. I have snippets of childhood images of Dad and his building. That is, the original Mines and Metallurgy building, with its big cloud-like piece of copper in front of it, empty classrooms that smelled of chalk and potential, and Dr. Lackaban's lab that was always full of interesting things and covered in rock dust. My memories of this building are somewhat clearer. Dad would drive me to school in St. Paul every day and talk about the underground. How it was perfect for Minnesota. You go down a mere 10 feet and the temperature remains constant all year round. And how, if he could just get that idea to the right ears, Minnesota could go really under to stay on top. Hang on, I'll just hang on a second. Welcome. So, how if you could just get the right people to listen, Minnesota could go under to stay on top. And then the building eventually came to be, but I had left for abroad by that time, before the building finally saw the light of day. It's an underground building, right? No? Dad came from very humble beginnings. The son of a miner, the oldest of 5 children, the family lived early on in a house with no running water or electricity. However, once at school, his abilities were recognized, cultivated, and encouraged by some dedicated teachers. And our Charlie eventually became the first in his family to go to university and then earn a PhD. But perhaps, have you heard the story of his thesis? One evening, when feeling particularly discouraged with his work, he was walking along a river and decided he should just forget it all and throw his thesis, of course the only copy, into the river. But then he had a prudent reflex and told himself to sleep on it. If it was still worthless when he woke up, he could throw it out the next day. This has been a recurring theme with Dad and sage advice to his children. When things look difficult, stop for a moment and definitely sleep on it before doing anything rash. We will work this out. Thankfully, the next morning he realized that it wasn't quite as bad as it seemed and didn't throw it out, or none of us would be here today, including me. But get his PhD he did, and a young Charles Fairhurst was invited to the United States at 27. He came over for what he told his family, and a few young female admirers, would just be a 2-year stint abroad. However, the stars aligned Strangers were kind, and he met Margaret. And 2 years turned into a lifetime. Dad never forgot those humble beginnings, nor those early teachers. He in turn became a dedicated teacher and mentor. And teaching, mentoring, and showing kindness to strangers are part of his DNA, which we can only hope has been passed on in some degree to us. Dad's love of travel and his view as a citizen of the world was and is an example to us all. Several of his children have worked and lived abroad, and all of his children travel. His commitment to attracting the best and brightest from around the world to Minnesota is well known, and many of you are the result. For us children, while we sometimes regretted rarely having a holiday meal with just the family, he opened us up to all cultures. Curious as always about differences in others, but always recognizing that inside we are all human beings that love our families and enjoy life. This has had an effect on all of us kids. Most of us are curious and will find out more about a person than they may have ever wanted to share. But we were trained at a young age to be very interested in others. Our house in South St. Paul welcomed not only a steady stream of foreign visitors, but also all the neighborhood kids. The boys, and they're here, and their friends rebuilt so many cars in that garage or on that driveway, I'm surprised we didn't get charged a business tax. Mother would quote Irma Bombeck, "There are 7 cars in the driveway, 1 is ours, and none of them are running." That relaxed attitude and general encouragement to fix things meant that most of my siblings and nieces and nephews are quite at ease picking up a hammer or a wrench to fix things. Although it's surprising, as Dad's only ever really had a roll of tape in his toolbox. Fixes everything with tape. Dad has always been somewhat ahead of his time, starting with advancing himself a grade at school, being a creator of the rock mechanics discipline in Minnesota, encouraging his girls to stand on their own 2 feet, opening up to world cultures, and finally deciding on and creating an underground building. Now, perhaps he didn't create it, nor was he the first person to think of living underground. Indeed, there are caves in Lascaux, France, that would prove otherwise. However, as a child, it was my dad who came up with this idea, and I thought it was just brilliant. Now, as an adult, I do understand that nothing like this is accomplished alone. I often think of Dad as a quarterback, with an entire team around him who block the opponents, catch the passes, run with the ball, or the idea. However, sometimes I feel like the team are the sweepers in a curling competition, furiously clearing the way for Dad as the skip, or the person who determines the strategy for the team and the one who delivers the last stone. That's what it's called. Several in the next branch of the Fairhurst family tree, the 16 grandchildren, have gone on to become engineers, which was inevitable. As Dad will preach that engineering will eventually solve all of the world's problems and should by all rights have its own Nobel Prize. Luckily, none of us went into rocket science because, as Dad will always remark, rocket science really isn't all that difficult. However, Dad is the first to appreciate the mastery in a beautiful piece of music, a good painting, a well-made loaf of bread, or a tasty mincemeat pie. And as the branches and the seedlings from the tree take on the characteristics of the trunk, others have gone on to represent additional traits of Dad's, becoming teachers, caregivers, inventors, problem solvers, mechanics, researchers, chefs, and even artists. And a quick little word about feminism. Dad always pushed his 3 girls to be independent, to learn, excel, and work. He believed in us. I'd say that encouragement has been passed down, as his granddaughters show a strong belief in family, caregiving, and teaching, but also in breaking gender barriers. As, for example, one is a firefighter, one is a rugby player, one is a loading dock worker, one is a doctor, and one is an art director. And given the strong-willed nature of those great-grandchildren, we can only imagine, 8 so far, by the way, and 1 more on the way, we can only imagine what they all will do. So there is one special person who can't be here today. but it is the person whose name by rights should be engraved just beside Dad's. Margaret, my mother, and Charles's wife of 64 years. Mother is at home, leaving us slowly, but still aware enough to be very proud of the honor you have bestowed upon the love of her life. Mother, more perhaps than anyone else, believed in Dad and gave him the possibility to move on to do great things. His family was, and still is, fundamentally important to him and is the bedrock upon which this career, and his life was built. So, on behalf of the Fairhurst gang, thank you for providing us with a space to stop by, smell the rock dust, and say, yes, that's your great-granddad, a very innovative and special man. Thank you.
Representing the College of Science and Engineering, it is my privilege to introduce our former dean, Mos Kaveh. Please join me in welcoming Mos.
Well, good afternoon. Afternoon again, Charles. It is truly my honor to represent Dean unveiling and the College of Science and Engineering in dedicating the Charles Fairhurst Rotunda. Unfortunately, Andrew could not be here because of a previous commitment, so his apologies. As you have heard, Charles was the head of the Department of Civil and Mineral Engineering from 1972 to 1987. And during his tenure as department head, Charles successfully advocated at the university and with the state legislature for the building of the civil engineering building, which opened in 1983. The inverted building design, which features 7 stories underground, is a fitting tribute to the department's excellence and the Fairhurst legacy in rock mechanics and rock engineering. Charles dedicated his entire career to the University of Minnesota, and it is truly fitting that we dedicate a small part of the civil engineering building in his honor. In a few minutes, we will unveil the Charles Fairhurst Rotunda sign and plaque, honoring his many accomplishments. A few you've already heard about. But let me list some of these once again. Some are repeated. He was a department head, 1972 to 1987, a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, 1979, co-founder of Itasca Consulting Group, Incorporated, 1981, the Theodore W. Bennett Professor of Mining Engineering and Rock Mechanics, 1988 to 1997, member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering, 1991, president of the International Society of Rock Mechanics, 1991 to 1995, honorary doctorate degrees from St. Petersburg Mining University, 1993, National Polytechnical Institute of Lorraine, 1996, University of Sheffield, 1997, University of Minnesota in 2000, and Officer of the National Order of the Legion of Honor, and humor me, Officier Ordre National de Légion d'Honneur. Congratulations, this was in 2013. So congratulations again. Thank you. As representative of the college, together with my former boss and colleague, Steve Crouch, I proudly declare that the Rotunda will be known as the Charles Fairhurst Rotunda. Steve, we can try to